In other breaking news, the sentencing memo for Michael Cohen has just come out. I don't even have a copy in front of me. I'm going to read you some of what I can see on my phone, and I'm going to hand it around to everybody else to pick up what they've got. Bear with us, please. Cohen, an attorney and businessman, committed 4 distinct federal crimes over a period of several years. He was motivated to do so by personal greed and repeatedly used his power and influence for deceptive ends. Now he seeks extraordinary leniency, a sentence of no jail time, based principally on his rose-colored view of the seriousness of the crimes, his claims to a sympathetic personal history, and his provision of certain information to law enforcement. But the crimes committed by Cohen were more serious than his submission allows and were marked by a pattern of deception that permeated his professional life and was evidently hidden from the friends and family members who wrote on his behalf. This is stunning. This is brutal, John Heilemann. This doesn't sound like Michael Cohen went in there and convinced anyone that he was telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Well, having not, I'm going to try to refrain from commenting too much on this, having not read the entire document. One of the things that I have learned from listening to our legal analysts when we were talking about the Michael Flynn documents is that when these sentencing documents come out, the prosecutor is required to lay out everything, right? The negative case against the person in question and all the positives, all the mitigating factors. Right. So having not read this document, I don't want to draw. I'm hesitant to draw conclusions about anything here until we've had a chance to actually get into it.
That's right. So here it is. We'll show it to you. It's thick. It's from the Southern District of New York. We were warned via tweet from our colleague Matt Miller that was where potentially the most danger and exposure lie, not just for Michael Cohen, but for the president. Let me just read you the table of contents here to give you a sense of the scope of this document for Michael Cohen. There is in the table of contents Michael Cohen's willful tax evasion, Michael Cohen's false statements to financial institutions, Cohen's illegal campaign contributions, Cohen's false statements to Congress, Cohen's meetings with law enforcement. So to your point, John Heilemann, there is a lot in here, but also Rick Stengel, he did a lot of bad things. He committed a lot of crimes.
Yes, and remember that Southern District's interests are not the same as the special counsel. The Southern District doesn't care that Michael Cohen is incriminating President Trump.
Right.
They are concerned that these are the crimes that you violated in our district, and you need to be punished for them. I mean, they don't see any leniency in the fact that Cohen trying to depict himself as someone who's trying to save the republic. No, the Southern District is concerned. He's a prosecutor concerned about the crimes he committed.
So you don't
think
tweeting vote for Democrats in the midterms is going to get him off scot-free? Ken Dilanian has joined us. Ken Dilanian, let me read to you from page 22. A substantial term of imprisonment is warranted. What Cohen was asking for was no prison term. It does not look like the Southern District of New York agreed with Michael Cohen. They write in this document, as set forth herein, consideration of the factors set forth in U.S. Code 183553 weighs heavily in favor of a substantial term of imprisonment. In particular, the nature and seriousness of the offenses and the need to promote respect for the law and afford adequate deterrence are especially weighty considerations. That seems really different, Ken Dilanian, from the language in the Mike Flynn sentencing document, which kind of had it on the one hand, on the other. On the one hand, Mike Flynn's military service was described by Mueller's team as admirable, as impressive. On the other, it was also described that Mike Flynn knew better, that as someone that served at the highest levels of government, he should have known better than to lie to the FBI. What do you make of the contrast here with Michael Cohen's document?
Oh, you're absolutely right, Nicole. This is a very tough document for Michael Cohen. The prosecutors are not buying his story that he should have no prison time, and they go through at great length his tax evasion, his lies. They also talk about the fact that he held himself out as a consultant with access to the Trump administration and made a lot of money, but they said that those promises of access and information rang hollow. But crucially, Nicole, there's a section about the illegal campaign contributions, which we already know about. He talked about this in court, but now the prosecution, the United States of America, has endorsed the idea that Michael Cohen made an illegal campaign contribution, in coordination with and at the direction of individual one, Donald J. Trump, now the President of the United States.
So, Ken Dilanian, does Donald J. Trump, in that statement you just read, become an unindicted co-conspirator in what the Southern District of New York describes in this document as a crime?
I mean, look, I think I don't know what constitutes the legal definition for that. I think in lay terms, absolutely. And, people have told folks at this network that that if this wasn't the president of the United States, he would be a target of the investigation, if not indicted, on illegal campaign finance violations, because the document goes on to talk about the scheme for which Michael Cohen was repaid for the money he paid to one of these women, and it was disguised as legal services, and that was all a fraud. Now, it doesn't say, this document does not say that Donald Trump knew that that's how Cohen was reimbursed and that it was fraudulent, but there are certainly others in the Trump organization knew because they had to cut the checks. And we know from how the Trump organization has worked over the years that very little happens without Donald Trump's express approval. So the other thing I wanted to mention to you, Nicole, is that on page 15, they start talking about Cohen's cooperation, and this is the Southern District now saying that we understand his cooperation with Robert Mueller's special counsel's office was ultimately credible and useful to its ongoing investigation. And that is interesting because when you think of the circles that Michael Cohen has been run in over the last 10 years, if he is cooperating in a credible fashion with Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian election interference and potentially obstruction of justice, that cannot be good news for Donald Trump and his family.
Chuck Rosenberg, let me ask you to pick up on that, and let me hone in on this section 4. I read the table of contents to our viewers. 4 separate areas of kinds of crimes that Michael Cohen committed. Southern District not calling for any leniency in his sentencing. And let me ask you about this, individual 1, because that's the President of the United States. Here on page 11, on approximately June 16, 2015, individual 1, that's Donald J. Trump, for whom Cohen worked at the time, began an ultimately successful campaign for president. Cohen had no formal title, but had a campaign email address and at various times advised the campaign. Cohen also made media appearances as a surrogate. During the campaign, Cohen played a central role in 2 similar schemes to purchase the rights to stories, each from women who claimed to have had an affair with individual 1, Donald Trump, so as to suppress the stories and thereby prevent them from influencing the election. With respect to both payments, Cohen acted with the intent to influence the 2016 election. Cohen coordinated his actions with 1 or more members of the campaign, including through meetings and phone calls about the fact, nature, and timing of the payments. Is the Southern District alleging or charging or describing a conspiracy to defraud or to commit campaign finance violations that includes the President of the United States?
First part of your question, yes, they're describing a conspiracy. The second part of your question, maybe. It's not clear with whom Michael Cohen conspired, although I recall him saying when he pled guilty that the payments were directed by the president. Now, of course, you would still need to show intent. But, Nicole, can I do a little bit of a reset here on sentencing?
Please.
There's some context that may be important. Michael Flynn's, well, back further. A sentence in the federal system is determined by the federal sentencing guidelines, advisory guidelines that the judge typically follows. Michael Flynn's crime, 1 count of lying to the FBI, had a guideline recommended sentence of 0 to 6 months. So even if he didn't cooperate, even if he did nothing other than plead guilty, he still stood a reasonably good chance of not going to jail at all. His guidelines were 0 to 6 months. That was not the case for Mr. Cohen. Mr. Cohen's guidelines were, and I forget the exact number, but were in the years
4
and
to 10
years range.
Right.
So even with substantial assistance, the notion that he would go to a fully probatable sentence, no jail time, is exceedingly small. And so he'll get some credit at sentencing for helping, but he's not starting in the same place as General Flynn. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Heilman, have you been pouring through this document?
Well, when you get towards, there's a place late in the document where it talks about the decision to not recommend a substantial decrease in the sentence. And it talks about why. There's a section that's called Cohen's request for sentence of time served is meritless, and it goes through and addresses his arguments, one of which is that the emotional toll on his family would be great, and they kind of dismiss that for various reasons. They talk about the financial support and fundraising for his children's former school, et cetera, et cetera. You get to page 37 of the document, and it says the following. Lastly, Cohen places heavy reliance on his provision of information to law enforcement as an argument for why he should get leniency. To be sure, this case is in some respects unique, and Cohen's decision to plead guilty and provide information to law enforcement in matters of national interest is deserving of credit. Indeed, it is the principal reason the office is not seeking a guideline sentence here. But as noted in more detail above, Cohen was well aware of the standard debriefing process in which cooperators in this district regularly participate and declined to participate.
Wow.
While he answered questions about the charged conduct, he refused to discuss other uncharged criminal conduct, if any, in which he may have participated. This precludes him from being given credit for, quote, substantial assistance and obtaining a 55K 1.1 letter. The court should not sentence Cohen as if he has one. This goes to the point, and this is a point that I heard Chuck make the other night when we were talking about the Flynn letter, where the word substantial assistance are a term of art. And they suggest certain particular things where Flynn went above and beyond the call of duty and gave Robert Mueller everything. In this case, it appears that Michael Cohen did cooperate, but did not cooperate in such a fulsome manner that the prosecutors now feel as though he's worthy of substantial assistance.
Let me just share with everybody, and Chuck, please jump in with me here. This is the sentencing and cooperation agreement from the Southern District. There will also be one from Robert Mueller. Is that right?
Well, it may be. Remember, the bulk of this case was driven by the Southern District of New York. I am sure that those prosecutors took into account the information that Cohen provided to Mueller. But my guess is that this document, the one you have in front of you, is going to drive the sentencing, Nicole.
And Joyce, you've joined us too. Your thoughts?
Well, I think it's important to remember that nothing that's in this document comes as a surprise to Michael Cohen or to his lawyers. This is part of the yin and yang of sentencing. Cohen obviously wants a sentence of no time. I think Chuck does a great job of pointing out why that's unlikely given Cohen's sentencing guidelines range. But the point from the Southern District of New York that John Heilman just read is the most interesting one. Cohen's cooperation wasn't immediate, it wasn't complete, it wasn't thorough. That's what prosecutors look for when they're giving people the most credit for sentencing. Cohen will get some credit, but it will not be the same sort of cooperation credit that Mike Flynn got that we saw earlier this week.
So I would ask Chuck and Joyce this question. Is there tension between the Southern District and the Special Counsel's Office? Now, right up high in the document, page 2, the Southern District says, to be clear, Cohen does not have a cooperation agreement. To be clear, Cohen's description of those efforts of helping the special counsel is overstated in some respects and incomplete in others. Is there tension between the special counsel and the Southern District's office?
Chuck, you want to take that first? Oh, go ahead, Joyce.
I would just say no one would be surprised if the Southern District of New York, which we sometimes lovingly call the Sovereign District of New York, had a little bit of tension with other prosecutors' offices. But the likelihood here is that Cohen may have cooperated differently with the Southern District than he did with special counsel. He may have had more sensitivity when it came to his personal financial dealings. And so they would likely have different assessments.
And they likely also had more leverage over him. His family, it was a family business. He could have had family members involved with the Southern District. Rev, you spent time with Michael Cohen. Did he know this was coming?
I think Joyce hit it right. I think that he would not be surprised. He, as I stated before, I've met with him twice. The last time he asked me to pray with him, he said, I'm going to jail. I think the question was how long and how severe, but I don't think that he's surprised. I think his lawyers are not surprised. I think he knew, particularly if he had never made the agreement, I think he knew he was looking at jail time. It was how much he could shave off, and I think that's what we're beginning to get some idea of.
And I throw this question to Chuck and Joyce, and I'll just say Chuck just because Joyce answered the last question. Chuck, is one of the just central key differences here between these two is that between the Flynn case and the Cohen case is that Flynn cooperated immediately, early, right out of the gate, and that Cohen was late. The difference here is, one of the big differences here is between early cooperation and late cooperation.
Flynn was immediate, it was fulsome, it was timely, and it was therefore substantial. Cohen was later and less. But look, to the earlier point about tension, there's always tension. DOJ is a big family. But in the end, it's a family, and they're going to reach one point of view. It's articulated in this document.
All right.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.